Hello, everyone. Day 5 of the new me. I wanted to tell a story about fear and trust, or what I like to call fear and confidence. And I grew up in the 80s. My father would take us camping and hiking. And one day I had this memory. And we got to hike up a cliff, and my siblings were running around, especially my brother Michael, who's 4 years older than me. And my dad went over and he's like, "Hey, I got to show you how to look over the edge here safely." And he got up on his belly and showed Michael how to slither over to the edge of the cliff and look over safely. And so Michael did it, and he was just hanging out over there staring at the edge of the cliff. And my dad then went over to my sister Tracy, who's 3 years older than me, and he did the same thing. He showed her how to get on her belly and slither over to the edge of the cliff and look over safely. And he saw me, and I was just sitting there nice and reserved and just watching everybody. And he's like, "Well, I should show you how to do this so that you know." And he got on his belly again, and we slithered over to the edge of the cliff. And he's like, "There you go. See, you're safe if you stay on your belly." And I saw my mom down below, and she happened to be pregnant with my sister Wendy. Otherwise, I think she might have been up there with us, or just not there. And I decided to wave to her because I thought it was cool that I could be so high up and see my mom down in the car. And she looked up and she freaked out, and she goes, "Steven, get the kids away from the edge of the cliff. Steven!" And my dad yells back, "They're fine." And so he came over to us and he's like, "You guys, get away from the edge of the cliff. Your mom's gonna leave soon, and when she leaves, you can come back here and look over the edge of the cliff." So she left, and then we went over there a couple times just to kind of look over the edge of the cliff. I did not learn what fear was until I got into kindergarten. It was always conquer and develop. I learned to just conquer and develop, conquer and develop. It was this constant learning. My father constantly was trying to teach us morals and virtues in life, and how to become a good person. So I learned about fear in kindergarten. I had no idea what it was. My brother Michael and my sister Tracy and I would walk to school every morning. We lived on Grandview Hill in Provo, and I was in kindergarten, and there were 2 different paths you could take to school. One took 10 minutes longer, and I would walk home with my friend Micah Murphy, and we would go down this long flight of stairs into the Lions Park, and then I would drop her off at her house, and then I'd walk around the hill and back up to my house. And then there was the other path that my brother and my sister and I would take in the morning. I got out of school around 11 because I only went to school in the mornings as a kindergartner. And Micah at first would walk with me to my house because it was faster. And then she would walk around the hill and go over to her house, and we'd walk home every day that way. And there was this little dog that would bark at us and nip at us, and it was scary. And one day it bit one of our friends in the hand. And so Micah and I decided we really didn't want to go that path anymore. And so we went the longer path for me, but the shorter path for her, which was down this long flight of stairs into Lions Park, and then I would drop her off at her house, and I would walk around the hill. And we were fine with that for a couple weeks, and then there was a little boy that we met in the park one day because we got out of school a little late because we were playing on the playground, and he started kicking us in the shins with his cowboy boots. And it hurt, and so we asked him not to do it. "Please don't do that." And he thought it was funny. So I think it was the following week of this kid terrorizing us, the teacher said, "We're gonna play dodgeball on Friday." And I got excited because I loved dodgeball. And this idea came into my head. And so I went over to the young boy who I avoided in class because he was mean. And I said, "Hey, if you just stop kicking me and Micah in the shins, I won't hit you in the head with the ball." And he laughed. He goes, "You're a girl, you can't hit me." And I looked at him and I thought, well, this is gonna be fun. So I stayed silent for 2 days. And I think it was Thursday, I went up to him again. I said, we're playing dodgeball tomorrow. And if you just promise to not kick us in the shins, I won't hit you in the head with the dodgeball. And he laughed. He's like, oh, whatever. So the day came when we were gonna play dodgeball, and we got to play 3 games in a row in PE. That's about how long it took for us to get through a whole hour of PE, was 3 games of dodgeball or something like that. I'm probably off on the time, but we got to play 3 games. And so the ball started flying, and I caught the ball, and I looked over at him, and he started running, and I got him really good in the shoulder, and it hit his ear a little. And so he was out, and I was like really upset at myself that I didn't get him in the head. So the next game came, and he caught the ball, and he looked at me, and he was gonna get me out, or so he thought. And he threw the ball at me, and I caught it. And before he could blink, the ball was coming right at his head, and it hit his head, and it bounced straight up to the ceiling, and it hit the ceiling. And as you know, in those gym classes, the ceiling's pretty high. So it bounced off his head so hard that it hit the ceiling up above. And it came back down, and I looked down, and he was all bloody, and he was crying. Now, when you're little, you don't have that fear of looking stupid when you just cried. You're 6 years old, you just cried. And so he was crying really loudly, and he was all bloody. And I think there was a rule you couldn't hit somebody in the head anymore or something like that. You had to stay below like the neck area. But that kid never bothered me again. So that's how I conquered my first fear. We knew that the path was good, so Micah and I would always walk home that way. And it took 10 minutes longer, but we didn't care because we could avoid the dog. One day I came home from school, and my mom was watching our soap opera, and there was All My Children, One Life to Live in General Hospital. And One Life to Live had this beautiful blonde girl, and she had this love interest for well over a year. And they were kissing. And I was devastated that I missed this kiss. And my mom's like, well, if you were here 10 minutes ago. And I was like, what? 10 minutes? I knew that there was a 10-minute difference between going the path of the park past Micah's house and going the path of the dog. There was a kid in my class who would tell me, you just need to run fast and the dog will leave you alone. Well, I knew I could run fast, so I was like, oh, that's just what I'll do. I'll just run past the dog. So I was always out of class really fast. I didn't like to wait around very often, and I knew I wasn't gonna walk home with Micah, so I kind of ran home, and I saw the dog. The dog started barking, and I just ran as fast as I could. I did not know that dogs could run faster than you when you're 6 years old. So the dog ran past me and cut me off and was barking, and I was just terrified. But I kept running, and I knew that I had to come up with a better plan than just running past this scary dog. So I thought about it all evening and all night, and it haunted me. I've got to come up with a solution to this problem. And I thought of my mom. My mom got into my head. And I knew that anytime my mother wanted anything, she could always just make sure it got done. And I knew exactly what to do the next day. So we walked to school, my brother and my sister and I went to the principal's office. And the secretary was sitting at the desk. And I said, hey, is the principal here? And his door was open, and he's like, I'm right here. And he came out, and he's like, hey, what's going on? And I told him about the dog and how our friend got bitten in the hand and that we were scared. And he kind of was like, I didn't know about this. And so he was in thought, and he looked concerned. And I said, well, maybe we could call somebody like the bishop over there. Now, back when I was growing up, everybody in Provo, Utah was Mormon. Even if you weren't Mormon, all the activities in the community were Mormon. So you were Mormon, and the bishop knew who everybody was. So they're like, oh, well, doesn't so-and-so from the office live over there? Let's call her and see if she knows who the bishop is. So I left and I went back to class. When recess came around, the principal and the secretary were in the hallway, and I went up and I asked, I said, did you call the bishop? And they said, yeah, he's at work though. So we left a message. Well, that wasn't gonna solve my problem that day. So I said, why don't we call the Relief Society president? Isn't she home? Because she's a woman. And back then, women were home most of the time. So they're like, yeah, so they called up the lady that worked at the school, and they did it in front of me, and the lady that worked at the school said, I know who she is, I'll give her a call. So when we were walking home that day, I walked with the group of kids that I thought walked very slowly, just to be safe. And we went up to the dog, and the kid that usually would run past the dog was terrified this day. The dog was getting more and more aggressive, and he was trying to run past it, but the dog was nipping at him pretty good. There was a gentleman that came out of the house, and he walked over to us and he said, I got a phone call today about this dog. And he's like, and I just wanted to know what was going on. So we told him about the dog biting our friend. And he said, well, I called Mrs. So-and-so, the owner of the dog. I can't remember her name. I called her brother, and he's going to come pick up the dog this week. So you don't have to worry about the dog. And you can walk home, and I'll make sure the dog doesn't hurt you. So that's how I overcame my second fear in kindergarten. And that is the difference between the 80s and today. We learn by example. Our parents problem solved, and we were there with them. And so all I did was take what I saw and I just applied it to my life. And so that's the moral of the story, is that maybe we should do something different with our kids today so they can problem solve, and pretty much that. We need to survive, otherwise we're gonna all die off.